So, welcome back for part 5 or 6, one or the other. Now last time I rambled quite a lot about relative power and the issues with respeccing in the game. This time I want to take a slightly more positive look at the perk systems. Now anybody that watched the beginning of the series will remember me mentioning, or may remember me mentioning, I guess the three ways I tend to assess the quality of progression systems in games. First of all, that I think they should make the games better. If they don't, then it's crap. Next, they should encourage all play styles. And finally, that they should produce noticeable change. Change that, you know, is immediately satisfying and fun and makes the gameplay better immediately. Now, the first two of these I think we've covered, and I think it's fair to say that, you know, Skyrim is about progression. It's about doing whatever you want in this big crazy world. It's, you know, to some people it's about self-expression and being whoever it is they want to be in this big open sandbox almost. So I definitely think progression is both core to the experience of this type of game, and I just think it adds a lot to the game as a whole. Without it, it would feel pretty shallow. So I think the devs have done a very, very good job of implementing it from that perspective. Rewarding all play styles. This is both fantastically done and terribly done all at the same time. There are systems in place to allow stealth play, melee play, quick weapons, slow weapons, ranged weapons, short weapons, long weapons, stealth, running in, light armor, heavy armor, mounted combat. People that like being on foot. There's people that like aggressive magic. There's people that like defensive magic and healing. There's options to develop kind of like illusionary magic and psychological stuff. And I mean, the options here, there's options for people to develop like potions and crafting. And I mean, you can't really ask for a more diverse progression system in a game than what is shown in Skyrim. It's probably one of the reasons why I've played so much of it and I've enjoyed so much of it, because when I get bored of playing one way, I can switch it up and go and play another. I guess on a different character, as I mentioned last time. But so that side is really well done. What's not so well done is what I dwelled on quite a lot in the last video about how you can't enjoy different playstyles in the same character. Now, the final criteria that I assess progression systems on is that noticeable change factor. This is both done, again, fantastically and with a fair degree of mediocrity in slightly different areas. The skill system itself, the leveling up, is underwhelming. You know, when you get, hey, look at me, I got two-handed to level 27, like, big whoop. You're almost never going to get a full point of damage increase for that. It's not going to be very noticeable. But how the game does noticeable change is through the gear system, which immediately changes the statics and stats by a lot, and primarily through the perk system. Now, the perks as a whole are pretty good. Now, for me, what it takes for a perk to be pretty good is it should make the game more enjoyable and more diverse. And I think if you've watched any of the other videos, you'll have heard me whinge about perks that just increase statistics. They exist in Skyrim. They do exist, but I'm very happy to say there are plenty in here which make the gameplay more enjoyable. And I want to take a look at some of them, because this is a system which really, it makes this game. It really is fantastic, and it could be even better with some tweaks. So let's go in and take a look at something like smithing first of all. The smithing skill tree um, gives major improvements to your ability to craft stuff in very noticeable, enjoyable, and exciting ways. And the perk system adds excitement to the skill system, and it's really very visible here. Now you may notice all of a sudden I'm level 81, and I have 78 perks to spend. This was just because I needed all the skill books, all the perks, so we can come and have a play and see what happens. So you start the game off and you can purchase steel smithing at level 20 in smithing. It's not showing up here, but that's the way it would be if I was under level 20. It'd tell me about that. And then when I purchase steel smithing, and we talked about it in the gear video, that you can now craft a whole new tier of gear. You go out and now you have to start looking for steel ingots, and you're crafting steel ore. When you move up to Elven, you're getting excited, and it actually does show the requirements here. You've got to be level 30, so not only can you craft and see that you can craft this new shiny cool looking gear, optionally, debatably, depending on if you like the appearance, the materials you look for out in the world change, and it influences kind of how you interact with the economy and the questing, you know, what ores are worth your time gathering and things like that. So this is a nice example. People look forward to getting new smithing perks because it means they can make new armor, and it also makes you look forward to leveling up a little bit more. There are people that will just craft daggers repeatedly and stuff just because they enjoy getting the smithing level up, and they'll go out collecting iron ore to craft iron daggers, because that's their process. They quite enjoy this whole crafting gameplay style. So there's the smithing, and they're pretty much the same all the way up the tree. You progress up the gear types, except for this one in the middle, which lets you improve magical weapons and armor. And magical weapons and armor is just weapons and armor with an enchantment. Now, we go into some of the other trees, we'll see that things can be both a little bit lackluster and really cool at the same time. So it's heavy armor, and in the first slot of nearly every perk, at nearly every skill tree, this exists. Increases efficiency, effectiveness, capability of said skill by 20%, then up to 40, 60, 80, 100. I think on some of them there might be a little tiny additional effect applied at 100, but it's been a while since I've got there. So these are a bit underwhelming. I've talked at length about how I dislike statistical enhancing skills. You typically don't look forward to getting small statistical boosts, and obviously investing statistically in heavy armor makes me far less inclined to use light armor, whereas if I just get cool benefits for heavy armor that make heavy armor right for the situation that heavy armor's right for. Now I know that sounds very very odd, so let's go and talk about block because it makes it easier. Investing in block makes me far less likely to use a weapon where I can't block, so it makes me less inclined to use magic in my left hand, and far less inclined to do it, because then these just become completely wasted perks. So that's my biggest issue about the progression system as a whole. Progressing in one makes me less inclined to use another tree, and because I'm less inclined to use another tree, or the abilities from the other tree, that the game becomes less diverse and I can't branch out as much. But I've whinged and I've bitched about that enough. So let's take a look at the perks themselves, because some of these are absolutely wicked, and they're fun, they're exciting, they change the game. Let's go left. Here we've got arrows that hit the shield do no damage. That's fun. Yes, it seems statistical, but it does change the gameplay. Let's back up, because I want to talk about this one last time. 10% is not a small change, and some of the changes here are up to 20%. Now that doesn't actually equate to a full 20% damage increase in a lot of cases, on two-handed and the one-handed, but they're still substantial damage increases, so they're still a little more exciting in traditional plus 5% that you see in some other games. So credit where credit's due. At least when they do statistics, they make them significant enough that you can go, whoop. Deflect arrows, yeah, that's fun. I like that. You know, it's just, it changes the way you interact with arrows, because the Elder Scrolls combat system, I know we haven't talked about it much, when you see an enemy is going to shoot arrows, you essentially get your character to do this. And you just try and trick the AI, because they try and predict where it is you're going to stand, and then they miss. Now, why I didn't just demonstrate that using the character, I have no idea, but hey-ho. Let's have a look, what else have we got? Time slows down if you're blocking during an enemy's power attack. Slowing down time is cool. Most people enjoy slowing down time. The only people that I've ever found that don't like that sort of thing are people that like the quick pace, and they don't want that taken away from them. So I can understand if people don't want that, and they like the rapid pace and the challenge of the combat, because that would be understandable. But because it's out of the tree, now I don't know if this was deliberate, and there are people within the design team that share this perspective, that slowing down time sometimes isn't what people are after, but it's out of the tree, so you're not required to get it. So I really like this. I think that's a really smart move. The ability to do a power bash, that's fun. That just means that when you bash, sod it, let's get it, and I'll show you. There we go. So let's buy lots of stuff. So here's a bash, and that'll, I believe that's got kind of a 1 value on the stagger chance, and it does like half a weapon swing's worth of damage. Not a weapon swing, but half a shield's worth of damage. Shield's damage is calculated based off your skill in block and the rating, the armor rating on the shield. So there's a normal bash, and here is a power bash, which is a huge stagger chance. And the video has crashed again, so let's just boot it back up, because I can't edit these at the moment because they're at a crazy aspect ratio, and I have started again far too many videos today. So let's just reboot. Gives me a chance for a sip of me brew anyway. Bom 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 bom. At least Skyrim loads nice and quickly. Well, fairly quickly. Where am I? So I'm back here. But I believe I'm back here after. Yes, I have leveled everything already. So, we were showing off the power bashes, and power bashes are massively increased force. They'll knock things further. They're much more likely to stagger people. Bashing does 5 times more damage. That is a statistical increase, but a huge one. Bashing all of a sudden becomes a combat ability rather than just a utility ability. I mean, it becomes damage rather than utility. A chance to disarm when power bashing. I love this, but I think it could be even better if, rather than... I typically shy away from percentage chances. I think RNG can be exciting, but I prefer I prefer to reward skill and hard work and things like that. So for example, if this said instead bashing the right arm of a target, your level has a good chance to disarm them, it still could include a little bit of RNG, but it would be more about skill, or bashing during a target's attack will disarm them, or has a very good chance to disarm them, or something like that. Make it much more reliable, much higher likelihood of this happening, but have it require some skill. Stuff like that. Now, I don't know if that conflicts with the accessibility design of the game. You know, do they want this game people to just be able to pick it up and play and explore and not have a particularly high skill floor for any of the moves, which I would completely understand, because obviously I don't know whether you're aware, but the Morrowind, the games 2 prior to this one, was nearly not a multi-platform release. The Elder Scrolls series up to that point had been PC exclusive through 1, 2, 3, 1 and 2 had been PC exclusive. I think it was Arena, sorry, I was trying to remember the name of the next one. Morrowind was 3, Oblivion was 4, this was 5, yeah. Morrowind nearly didn't come to PC, but when the dev team was kind of approached by Xbox, they were persuaded, despite some, I guess, reservations from Todd Howard's thinking that people on Xbox didn't really want this back then. And then, like I said, he released it and it became one of the best selling games on the Xbox. So it's a very approachable game series nowadays, and Skyrim has become extraordinarily mainstream. So I tend to lean towards the more hardcore audiences in my design preferences. I love low skill floor. I think accessibility is great. High skill ceiling, when you can include that as well, that's fantastic. So what I mean by skill floor is the amount of skill required to engage in the system, and skill ceiling, I mean the maximum amount of skill that can be applied for benefits in a game. So there's that. So I understand if the perks and things are designed to reward players with lower skill levels, less time, maybe people that don't get to play as much, when, you know, I tend to favour high skill systems that reward players who are willing to put in the time and the effort and learn it inside out and practice and stuff. So let's have a look at a few more. Blocking with a shield reduces fire, frost and shock damage by 50%. Statistical game, but at least they went to town, made it across 3 areas and 50%. This changes how you fight dragons, and that is a game changer. Having the capacity to block a dragon's breath, and even the way you fight mages, that's pretty cool. I like that. Block runner, able to move faster with the shield raised. That is quite nice. And then finally, they tend to save the most fun one for last. Sprinting with a shield knocks down most targets. So that's well done. You know, it costs you a lot to sprint with a shield up, but you've got to put in a lot of time to get to 100. So most of these, they're not statistical increases. Most of these don't make not using a shield crazy. They just make using a shield very appealing when the situation is right for it. And that's what I love about a lot of the perks in this game. A lot of them are really good and really fun. Archery, you have the same crazy, you know, bows do 60% more, 80% more. Bows now do twice as much damage. You get stuff like this. Pressing block will zoom in your view. That's damn useful. And then this again, out to the side. Zooming with bows slows time by 50%, by 75%. I love this design decision to put slowing time moves out to the side, so they're not critical. You don't have to get them to progress, and the people that don't want them can avoid them altogether. It's such a clever choice if that was the reason they decided to do it. You know, you have other stuff in here like critical shots, power shots. What do power shots do? Arrows stagger all but the largest opponents 50% of the time. Now, again, RNG, but 50% is pretty high. So all it means is that it won't do it every shot. You can't necessarily fully stagger lock a target, but if you fire continuously at the same target, you can chain them. Bows draw 30% faster and paralyze 15% of the time. Again, I would prefer if it was skill based. Maybe a low chance to paralyze would be nice all the time. You know, maybe it gives you a 5 chance to paralyze a target, 30% chance to paralyze a target if you shoot them in the leg. That'd be cool if it had both a decently placed skill floor and ceiling. However, the problem with these systems that I'm suggesting with locational damage is Skyrim does not implement locational damage system. As far as I know, you don't do more damage for hitting the legs and stuff. But that said, I have played mods that manage to include things like headshots. So I don't know, the infrastructure might be there for it, or it might have been some very snazzy modding work, or it might be there but not taken into account on the damage formulas. I don't know. Obviously the issue with a game like this is it's really pushing the boundaries. Now this came out the same year as other melee type games like Devil May Cry and Raiden's Revengeance, and it's not as pretty a game in its vanilla form as those two, but you've got to remember what a hugely open world this is in. So they do have some limitations with regards to the I wish I had some arrows to play with my new stuff, but I know there is some. Yeah, so there's one. Sorted. So yeah, so they do have some limitations as to how far they can push the combat system and stuff like that. But this is why I love the perks in this game, because they are gameplay changing. They're fun. You do look forward to picking them up. Let's have a look. The heavy armor tree does things like unarmed attacks do extra damage, half of falling damage, which I just thought was a weird one for the heavy armor tree. I always thought that should have been in the light armor tree, so there are some issues like this. Conditioning, heavy armor weighs nothing, it doesn't slow you down. That one feels odd, but you have to appreciate how slow you move in full heavy armor in this game. I mean, you really snail around, and a horse becomes a necessity. What else have we got? Bonus armor, less stagger, additional bonus armor, reflect melee damage back. They're pretty uninteresting, but they are the statistical benefits which match the playstyle at least. So they're well aligned with the situation. On the right hand side anyway, they're very well aligned with the situation that heavy armor is made for. Getting into battles, soaking up damage. As the left side, not so much, falling damage and running quickly, but all it does is it balances out the heavy armor, making it a bit more accessible, reducing some of the drawbacks of it instead of just increasing the strengths. So it becomes a little bit more similar to light armor the further through you get. I mean, by contrast, let's have a look what light picks up. Armor rating, armor bonus, weighs nothing, but you get it very early. You get level 50 instead of like level 100. Stamina regenerates faster, so you can be much more aggressive. Additional damage from melee attacks, and damage bonuses. So light armor's aggression, heavy armor's soaking up damage. They fit their roles well, but they're a little bit lackluster. Again, some of the other trees suffer from the same thing. Sneaking tree scales so weirdly. You're 20% harder to detect when sneaking is the first perk. The next one only takes you to 25%. That makes the first one extremely valuable, but the others not so. And there's a few things like this which are just a bit odd. It has some investment issues in the sneak tree. Sneak attacks with one-handed weapons now do 6 times damage. That's rather than the base of 3 times. Well, that's okay if you play with one-handed weapons, but what if you don't? Right? Sneak attacks with bows now do 3 times rather than 1.5 times. So that means if you don't want the one-handed one, because you'd never use them, but you do want the bow one, it now costs you 2 perks instead of 1. And that doesn't feel very balanced to me. I'd much have rather kind of there was a start point and they all branched off there, and you could just pick up the ones that you wanted, rather than have to get them all. And then finally, sneak attacks with daggers do a total of 15 times. This just feels, it feels a bit odd. But I guess if daggers are truly designed for stealth, because they're lighter, and I believe it's only boot lightness actually that affects your ability to remain undetected, but hey, there you go. And there's obviously nothing which boosts two-handed weapons and stuff, so you get stuff like muffled movement, which is really cool. You don't trigger pressure plates. You can execute a silent forward roll. That is cool. Running and walking doesn't affect detection. That is cool. So there is loads of... This is just the forward roll. I'd forgotten how weird this looks when you have a shield and stuff, because stuff just like flaps around all over the show. So for the most part, the skills in this game are... the perks in this game are actually really cool. They're diverse enough. They play to the strengths of the skills that they're supposed to be boosting. So they actually match the gameplay they're trying to encourage and they're trying to enhance. which sounds so obvious, but it's not always the case. There's skills that people will never pick up sometimes, just because they don't make sense in their trees, and for the most part they do in this, and considering how many trees they are, I'd consider that pretty well done. Oh. Wow. I'm going to let you on, and these are like level 4 bandits, because they loaded in before I before I leveled myself up, so I won't be having too much of a hard time here. There are some trees which I've never known people want to invest in. Oh god, you can so look, you completely disappear when I stood still. That's the final sneak skill. Yeah, so there are some trees that I've never known people to invest in. As you can see, my ability to remain undetected is a little bit crazy right now because this guy's a low level. I mean, I can pick up a sword or a pickaxe and just clobber him over the head. Hey, I can show pickpocketing now. So yeah, so I have a 90% chance to steal the bow. And I stole his bow. So if I was to hit him over the head and then run away, which I won't need to because he's dead, he wouldn't have a bow. So the perks and stuff they're well done for the most part. I typically do not like the one-handed and the two-handed. They feature a lot of damage boosts. You know, one-handed weapons do 20% more damage. Dual-wielding attacks are 20% faster. I prefer attack speed boosts because you feel the difference. Dual-wielding power attacks do 50% bonus damage. Fighting stance, less stamina for power attacks, again statistical. Standing power attacks do bonus damage and decapitate your enemies sometimes. These are cool. Critical charge, you can do like a sprinting power attack now, which does huge damage. You can do a backwards power attack, which can paralyze. So they add some slightly new moves, but they don't really feel all that different. And there goes Skyrim once more, so let's reboot. So yeah, so the one and two-handed are less interesting, and I do believe because they require so much point investment in the damage they deal to remain competitive into the game, you know, into picking up the 20%, 40%, 60% damage boosts. That like sometimes you just want to pick up a two-handed weapon and have fun. Sometimes you pick up a legendary two-handed weapon or a unique, and you want to go out and enjoy it, but you can't because your skills and statistics aren't at the level, and because you can't re-roll a character without screwing over your combat effectiveness for your combat level or for your character level. There's no way to re-engage that. I quite like the system they used back in Oblivion. Back in Oblivion, rather than having one-handed and two-handed, they used a system where they used blade and blunt, and this meant, yes, you couldn't switch between swords and, let's say, clubs if there was clubs, or like maces, but you could switch between two-handed swords and one-handed, and I think switching from a one-handed weapon to a two-handed and changing up the gameplay, having that option available to you is more important than actually having the option to just change from a sharp to a not sharp, which in terms of gameplay in this game has very, very little effect. Now it could do if they chose to. I mean, they could have more physics on the blunt weapons. They could have more, you know, shield bashiness. They could have sharp weapons give bleed the target, which they do to a degree. They sit also within the two-handed and one-handed skill trees. You know, battle axes cause the target to bleed, great swords do critical damage, and warhammers ignore armor. So they do differentiate them through the skill trees. But again, it's just more point investment that makes switching up your weapon type impossible late in the game without huge investment. However, skill trees as a whole, why'd that keep trying to run away, are pretty good. Some of them do spend a little bit too long, I think, engaging in statistics rather than gameplay changes. Some of them have fantastic gameplay changes, like the block tree. What a tree the block tree is. Lot of fun you can have with that. Archery is quite fun, increases the speed, and the speed of archery makes quite a big difference. Sneak is quite well done. Lock picking, I think it's quite a boring tree. Just makes locks easier to pick. Yeah, pick locks without being noticed. Gives you a copy of a picked lock. Oh, that one's quite cool. So if you pick a lock once, you never have to pick it again because you've got a copy of the key. Find more gold in chests, special treasure, knockpicks never break. It's a lot of investment of perks that you could get more fun things with. There's stuff like the alchemy trees and the pickpocket trees. I've never known anybody really invest too much in pickpocket, but it's quite cool that you can get things that like put poisons in pockets. These are all stuff that change gameplay, which I'd love to see more of. And not just because they make the perk trees more exciting, but because the less statistical, and this is what I was talking about the intertwinedness of all the systems in this game, the less statistical increases that you put in perk trees, or if you put less statistical increases in these perk trees, they would mean that you could afford to branch out more into the late game, because it would just be one more way where let's say it the other way around. Because there are statistical increases in the perk trees, it just becomes one more reason why you cannot swap weapon type or combat type, because your damage is not enough. Now, if instead of your damage being not enough, the utility is not enough, you can still swap around for the right weapon, for the right attack, for the right situation. And this is demonstrated best by the destruction tree. Ooh, where is it? There seems to be loads of motion blur on that going across the screen, and it's making me feel a bit weird. It's blue. Here we go. Here's what I mean. Let's imagine there was a tree for shock, there was a tree for frost, and there was a tree for flames, which there kind of is within destruction. In this game, there is not as much as I'd like, but there is occasionally a time when you want to use shock, you want to use frost, and you want to use flames. And really, games are fun when you could switch stuff around. Games like The Witcher 3 do this really well. Different spells work really well against different monsters. In this, they have a hell of a lot of statistical increases across the three trees here. There are baseline trees and a neutral tree for double casting, on one, little branches to runes and stuff. But really, shock does more damage, frost does more damage, fire does more damage. Fire does even more damage and makes them flee, paralyzes them if the health is low. Shock disintegrates them. So it differentiates the trees a little bit, but really it's just about damage changes. I'd much rather see, rather than the damage boosts, see more emphasis on things like this, about the paralysis chances, the disintegration chances, the fire chances. I'd sooner see things like that lets you exploit certain weaknesses in shock targets. So like if a target's already weak to shock, you have an even greater chance of stunning them. If it's raining, shock is better. So it contextualizes the combat even more, and makes things more intelligent, more diverse. I think I've said diverse about 4,000 times, but really that is what this game is both great at and pants at encouraging. Fire could do things like set the ground on fire, so you can draw lines of flame. Yes, there is a firewall skill for any hardcore Skyrim fans, point that out, but to actually have perks to do this type of thing would be pretty awesome. Maybe you could it just added benefits to using fire skills. Like fire skills could be cast twice, maybe lightning skills could arc to multiple targets, maybe frost skills could linger in the air for a while, and things that changed how the spells functioned instead of just changing their stats. It's a very complicated system to redesign on the hoof, but I'm looking forward to getting into some of these trees and the combat systems in a lot more detail, and asking myself the question is, if I was making the next Elder Scrolls, how would I do combat? How would I do magic? How would I do melee? How would I do stealth? With the huge constraints that the massive open world sandbox puts on the design of a game. It's a very different, I guess, scenario designing for this kind of game in comparison to a game where maybe you're only doing stealth, or you're only doing combat, or you're only doing magic. I mean, there are a lot of constraints that just wouldn't exist elsewhere. Be gone. And yeah, sure. So that's basically the perk trees. For the most part, they're very good. They're very fun. Some of the trees feature astoundingly fun perks, like the block. Oh, I've got to try the block bash. Woo. That didn't work at all.
Not impressed.
Put the shield up and I sprint. How do I sprint on this game? Here's L1. Did I not buy it? I mustn't have bought it. So some of the trees feature astoundingly fun. I didn't buy it before the game crashed. Astoundingly fun perks which actually change the gameplay. Others just change statistics and make the game less enjoyable in the long term, and make you even less likely to be able to actually branch out and enjoy the different areas of gameplay without resetting a new character. Boom! Havoc physics, man. Some of the physics will be especially weird since I'm playing in excess of 60 FPS. The physics engine in Skyrim, I believe, does weird things when you play above 60 FPS. So if you ever find bowls and stuff spawned under tables and places where they just shouldn't be, that's pretty much the cause of it. So when I'm modding, I normally try and keep the FPS down. But anyway, I digest. Skill trees are cool. They're pretty well done. They encourage all play styles, and for the most part, they encourage very noticeable change, and they're exciting because of that. If I was going to change small things, I'd get rid of some of the statistical bonuses and make them more about defining the role of that skill. So, you know, I'd make two-handed more about breaking through shields and hitting multiple targets, and one-handed about the slick fencing attacks on single targets, and about countering and parrying. And I think the blocking tree is a fantastic example of how, without too many statistical boons, you can define the role of a gameplay element or a play style or a combat system without doing almost any negative damage to the rest of the game. And it means if you do want to put your shield away later on, so be it. So yeah, that's it. That's perk systems. I don't know what I'm going to look at next, but hopefully the weather will be a little nicer, because the last couple of videos have been grey and grim. So take it easy. Happy gaming.